starting to feel weird. I think I'm freaking out.
I was born in La Mesa, California in September on the 13th of 1961, and I grew up in San Diego County until I was around 4. Then we moved up into Orange County. Lived there for a good portion of my life until I ended up moving away from living with my family and living on my own. And that happened when I was 15, and I ended up being on my own until I moved up to Los Angeles, and that was, I think I was about 20 years old. And all that time growing up in between, I had a pretty abnormal childhood. I was a latchkey kid, product of a broken family. My mom and dad divorced. Both parents were alcoholic, although I didn't know. My mom was a functioning alcoholic. I never even saw it until I found out after she had passed away that she could drink like normal people. Who knew? I spent a lot of time growing up with my sisters who had husbands that were old enough to actually biologically be my father. So it was really weird when we would stay with my sisters. You know, we would move. My dad would find where we were because my mom and dad would have divorced. As soon as my dad finds us, we move. We move to a place, temporarily stay with a relative until we can find a new apartment. And it's almost always my 2 oldest sisters or my aunt. And through all that period, I started to really get close with my youngest sister, Debbie, who played the piano. And bless her heart, she was trying to play piano. And I ended up playing guitar because it was fun. The guitar was there, and it helped make her piano sound better. The music that I listened to growing up was very different from what most kids would listen to because I had siblings that were about a generation ahead of me with the people that they were associating with and ultimately dating and, you know, in the end marrying. I had a brother-in-law named Stan who was really cool. He was a motorcycle cop for the California Highway Patrol and used to do his beat on Pacific Coast Highway. Talk about a gig. I mean, if you're gonna be a police officer, who wouldn't want to ride a motorcycle up and down the beach every day, you know? But anyways, he used to listen to really cool music from the British invasion and several American bands that were kind of a similar construct. All these kind of guys like Frankie Valli and then my sisters, you know, they all listened to Motown. They loved Motown. That's why Megadeth has kind of a bounce to it. And I think that rhythm and blues that I listened to helped me to kind of remember, you know, what music is about. My teenage years were as rowdy and as rambunctious as any teenager could be. I got kicked out of high school and I went to night school. I got kicked out of night school and forced into college, junior college. I got kicked out of that. And then I ended up in the last house on the street for a bad boy like myself, playing guitar in Metallica. In the beginning of my guitar playing, there was no real one guitar player that made me want to pick up the guitar and play because in the beginning, I didn't really know that I was going to be a lead guitar player. I really didn't even know the difference between a guitar player and a rhythm guitar player and a lead guitar player. You know, I was 13 at the time when I first started getting serious about guitar, and you know, I just was starting to figure out, you know, how to hotwire cars at the time. So I, you know, learning the difference between guitar players and stuff. I had more important things to figure out, you know. But once I did figure out that you know, rhythm and lead are 2 different animals, I thought, why not do both and just be the most well-rounded, almost athletic to a point guitar player. And when it got to the point where I realized the difference between a rhythm guitar player, it was clear to me the best rhythm guitar player that I had met up until that point was Malcolm from AC/DC. And probably second to him would have been any of the new wave of British heavy metal guys, Brian Tatler, the guys in Priest, the guys in Maiden. You know, there's so many other guys, but I think my number one rhythm guitar player would have been Malcolm. And then if you talk about the rhythm players, I remember saying something that, to me, I think the trinity of rhythm guitar players in the metal world is Malcolm, Hetfield, and myself, but I think that's being very ostentatious, me saying that about myself. But, you know, truth be told, I think that's the three most well adapted to our job players, if I can say that without sounding like a dick. And as far as a lead guitar player is concerned, having been so enamored with AC/DC when I started listening to them, it was no surprise that I would be influenced by Angus. But I also loved Ace Frehley, Ted Nugent, Jimmy Page, and George Harrison was an amazing guitar player. So is Keith Richards, you know, and you don't really know until you watch or you try and play guitar and you figure out that's not so easy. Panic was my first band that actually had multiple players. There was a drummer, two guitar players, a bassist, and a singer. And believe it or not, the singer was really good. He was able to sing some of the higher stuff, but he had his own life going with a beautiful wife and a child. So that was a big challenge for us. And we were plagued by death and destruction. Our first show that we did with Panic was down in Dana Point, and on the way home, the drummer was driving his car, and our sound man was asleep in the back seat, and the drummer, fell asleep and hit a traffic box on Pacific Coast Highway in Huntington Beach, the south side of the pier. And the car crashed and fell on its side. The driver, he broke his neck and died. And the drummer was in the back seat of the car and it burst into flames and he died. It wasn't shortly after that there was another accident and the other guitar player in the band got in a car crash and died. And there's only one person left from that band besides the singer that I mentioned or myself. I'd been playing in Panic for a little while, and the drinking and drug use was increasing as quickly as our popularity was. And I had a show that we did in Huntington Beach, and we played outside. It was it just wasn't meant to be, because it was by a pool and some idiot jumped in the pool and all the water was rushing over the edge of the pool towards our equipment. And there was another fiasco like that right after, where I just figured I need something different. I answered an ad. It was an ad in the Recycler paper, and the Recycler was a classified newspaper in Orange County, Los Angeles area. And it said, looking for a lead guitar player that likes Motorhead, Saxon. And I called up this guy and he goes, hello? And I said, hello. Calling about the ad in the newspaper. And we just started talking about bands. And every band that I would say, he would go, you know? I said, yeah, I like Budgie. Fuck, you know Budgie? Yeah, I've got the Impeccable album. I really dig that album. Don't Melt the Ice Away is, or Melt the Ice Away is one of my favorite songs on that record. And then I would say something about Motorhead. Fuck, man, you know Motorhead? You know, all this stuff. Or, you know, if it wasn't Motorhead, it was Maiden or Priest or whatever. Well, the first songs that we wrote, there was only two people writing. I had my songs that were done, and James had his songs that were done. The first record I played on with Metallica had Hit the Lights. We got a chance to put out a new version of that, And I just went to town on it. And I just figured, you know what, if I'm gonna solo on this, I'm gonna solo like a motherfucker. And that's how I made my name in the metal world, was on that first Metallica track. From there on, it was just us building Metallica. And it's funny, when I look back at that period, you know, we all kind of thought we were all great in our own right, but I think probably out of the four of us in the beginning, the Young Metal Attack, the Metal Up Your Ass lineup, I think Ron McGovney was probably the most grounded of all of us. You know, I still know where I stand in the whole process, but you know, Ron was really reliable, really a dependable bass player. Most bass players, you know, that's you hope they're like that, and he was. And looking back, it's interesting. I'm glad that Metallica got Cliff, and I think that Ron McGovney is too, but I really think he should have continued pursuing music because of what to me looked like he had a future. The first time I heard Cliff Burton play was on a tape. And, you know, there was some stuff on there that was okay. I didn't think Trauma was a great band, but the bass playing was obviously something to take notice of. And when Cliff and we had rehearsed for the first time, you knew there was something there, there was a spark, because it just seemed like my playing was able to really stand out from the drums and start to line up more with James, and that the drums and the bass started to have their thing, but that there was also this weird kind of like a connector of some sort where Cliff kind of connected with us and made it all work. Because I didn't really connect with bass players in the beginning with my playing. I hadn't played that much with other people, so the idea of playing with other people just didn't seem like it was an important thing. And while I was playing with James, that was really fun, because in the beginning he didn't play guitar. The last time we did anything in that band before he started playing, we did a concert and had this guy named Brad Parker play guitar with us. And Brad didn't go down so well, so it was cool, and James made the jump. The ride home from New York was long. I knew it was going to be long. The ride out was long. The ride out was dangerous. The ride out was bad. Because of the crash in Laramie, Wyoming, I think that's what made me the guy that had to go. And I don't know, I probably was destined to leave before that because of, you know, the word destiny and the fact that there was just so much talent and so much personality between the, you know, the four of us. I don't know that we could have survived. There was destined to be some kind of an explosion at some point. You know, leaving Metallica, a lot of the things that they did, watching them have their success, it could have been anything. You know, they could have quit metal and started making Twinkies, and I would have been jealous because we were friends, and then all of a sudden we're not friends anymore. And all I know is that I want to keep doing what we're doing together because we make people happy. And the four of us get to drive around like we're something special, and I've never felt special before in my life until now, when we have this guitar, we've got this band, and now I feel like I'm somebody. I'm glad to say that our friendship today is so much different from that moment, those moments, those days, those times, those people. We're all different. We're dads. We're older now, and I think that probably was the most shocking and hardest thing to tolerate or to accept at the end, was that when the band stopped, I've kind of felt like I stopped. I know that's not true, but you know, what's a young kid at the time to think? I had no mentors. I had no one talking into my life and saying, you're going to get through this and you're going to be so much happier for it. I did a lot of soul searching on the way home. Did I want to play guitar? Did I want to keep doing this? What am I going to do? I got it. I'm going to make a band that's more metal than Metallica. And I need to come up with a name that's more metal than a band that has metal in their name. So what can I come up with? And I just figured, well, I'll wait for that for a little bit. And I started writing lyrics. And I was in the bus and I looked down on the ground. There's a piece of paper there. It was a handbill from Senator Alan Cranston somebody had left on the ground. Obviously that bus had met me wherever I was at. It was on a drive-through from California, or somebody that was a Californian had that handbill and left it on the floor. And Alan Cranston said that the arsenal of Megadeth cannot be rid. And I thought, Arsenal of Megadeth, that's a great name. That's a great name for a song. I'm just happy that on the way home, that whatever was the initial spark to get me to keep playing, that I didn't listen to those little voices that said, you deserve to be fired. The way that my post-Metallica life started to get equilibrium was, it was God, arduous. It was so, it took a while, and it was really, every step was, it was so critical to me that I did not make a mistake. And, you know, for every mistake I made, the other bands that were there, that were in my circle, would make 2 or 3. So the mistake count for me was really low, but there were still mistakes being made. When Megadeth was going through naming itself, you know, obviously there's many different stories about who named it. I came up with the name Megadeth for the song that ended up being called Set the World Afire. And when we were looking at some different names, you know, we had a singer in the band, this singer named Laura Kane, and Laura looked at some of my song titles, because I was already starting to write the originals, and he goes, hey man, why don't we just call it Megadeth, man? And I went, great, because I had tried to name it something in a foreign language. I wanted it to name it something really cool, like fire and bomb together, but I don't think that would ever work if you're in a public environment saying that out, or having, you know, 10 to 100,000 people chanting fire and bomb in a concert. I think people around the neighborhood would freak out a little bit. I never planned on being a singer. I always hoped I could be a lead guitar player, and just, you know, there's a certain aloofness that a lead guitar player can kind of get away with. So when it came down to singing, we obviously had tried some people from the story about trying to name Megadeth, and you know, we were fair. we had a lot of auditions, and it was New Year's Eve. I can't remember what year it was, but we were at the studio. It was called Curly Joe's Studio over in the valley somewhere. For some reason, Gar spoke up and said, "Why don't you try singing?" And I probably should have said, "Why don't you?" instead, but I didn't. And I stepped up to the microphone and I sang the first song, and it hurt. It actually was very painful to me because I didn't know how to breathe properly. So I was yelling the whole time. And as fast as I could get another breath in, as fast as I could get it out. And because I wasn't able to finish what I was saying, I was continuing to exhale long past it was time for me to start inhaling again. So I'm trying to unteach myself how to breathe while I'm singing. I'm suffocating myself. At the same time, I'm kind of drowning in my own breath. And that's supposed to be fun. When the song was over, I said, it feels like I just had a nail hammered through my eyeball. We went through a lot of early shows in the beginning, and believe it or not, when it came time for us to get signed, the label had never seen us. They didn't know anything about us. We went into their office and said, "Hi, I'm Dave, we're Megadeth," and the guy said, "I don't give a fuck," and we left. We were walking down the street back to our manager, Jay Jones's Volkswagen Bug at the time, and we start hearing this come running up behind us, and it's Cliff Coltrane, my good friend, and he says, wait, I just called back to New York, and they said you have to come back into the office. And I went, hey, let's go back inside. So we went back inside, and that's when we found out that Combat wanted to sign us. But the budget for our first record, it's my first record still, but I mean, even I knew the money that they'd given us to do that record was an insult. We were at the Moody Blues studio up in Malibu, and it was expensive there. And I was looking at the rates and trying to figure out how many days are we going to be able to do the record in, and stuff what a young record producer would do. And in walks Jay Jones and Chris Poland, and they had stopped on the way to the studio and spent half the budget on other things. And so we ended up making Killing Is My Business for $4,000, and I had to call the label one night and say, look, we're out of money, and we're in trouble, I need your help. So the guy, he comes down there, and he didn't do the whole, I'm gonna kill you guys. Consequently, he did just the opposite. He goes, we gotta get through this. Let's figure out what these guys need to finish their job. Because we started that record with Jay Jones producing it and ended up firing him and had Carrot Faye take over. And Carrot was a very unique character himself. So that was part of the all of the maneuvering that went around after that record started, was jumping around from Jay to Carrot, and then getting rid of Carrot and having someone else work on it. We had Randy Burns and Casey McMacken help us with that record too. And by the time it was time to turn it in, we were just grateful to get it in, get it done. The first tour that we did, we actually went through a lot of hardship because of everybody's chemical dependencies. And there was one part where we were getting ready to leave to go out on tour, and Chris had gone off someplace and ended up not being able to leave on tour. And we had to scramble to find the first viable contender we could find that could play those songs. So I'm in crash course mode, teaching this guy named Mike Albert, the lead guitar player from Captain Beefheart. So that was interesting. At the time we were in Atlanta, and we were in a taxi, and the taxi driver drove over a human being going 60 miles an hour. It was interesting. Gar driving off the freeway on the way to Cincinnati and taking out one of those giant mileage signs and almost killing us all was very strange indeed. There's a lot of stuff like that. The crowd response on the first tour was really great. We had people of all different walks of life showing up, and granted, they were really small venues, but we didn't care. We were happy to get paid in pitchers of beer and just get beer money and gas money to get to the next city. Usually we would meet some fans there that were kind enough to give us a little bit of some food money, and you know, those beginning years were really lean. You know, there was one point where we pulled over in Texas, and I had to call the record label and tell them we had run out of gas and we're stuck at a hotel and we can't check in because we don't have any money. And the guy tells me over the phone, "You better get a day job." And I thought, you know we're on tour, and you know my temper, so why are you doing this to me of all people right now? Because you're gonna get it at some point. Peace House lyrics were actually written with a very fat felt pen on the wall in the rehearsal studios in Vernon, California. I had been living there because we were all homeless, and I was living at the rehearsal building, which was dreadful. There was no fridge, no food, no nothing, no showers. And one day there was a magazine on the nightstand, not the nightstand, the coffee table in the front room, and it was a Reader's Digest, and it had a story from Patti Smythe. Patti Smythe's cool, right? So she was talking about how peace sells, but nobody's buying it, and I went, wow, that's a really cool statement. Peace sells, but nobody's buying. And then I changed it to peace sells, but who's buying? Getting signed to a major label was a big deal for us. The whole courtship with Tim Carr and Michael Lago, it got out of control at the end. I remember we were in New York and we were playing, and everybody was just nuts. Who's going to sign him? Who's going to sign him? Who's going to sign him? And it started to make me feel a little crazy because I didn't know where we were going to go. I knew we weren't going to go to Elektra. And I didn't know if I liked Capitol because all I kept thinking of was, it's the Beach Boys label. They don't know anything about metal. Of course, Frank Sinatra's cool. The Sex Pistols, yeah, maybe. But MC Hammer, You know, no offense now, Hammer. But, you know, I just had my reservations, and once we did go to Capitol, it was great. Unfortunately, it didn't last very long. We had 7 presidents while I was there. I think I may have been there 17 years, and, you know, if you do the math, that's about 2.5 years a person. And I have to tell you, any fool can see this. When a new record company president or a president of any company comes in, they want to make a difference, right? So they come in, they see all these bands that are there already, that are established. What kind of a difference can they really make? No, they need to break a new band. They need to get a new band, make their name, make their mark, make their splash, their new band, especially when it's a guy that signed Nirvana coming in. He doesn't want to go pay attention to Bonnie Raitt or Dave Mustaine. He wants to sign another Nirvana. And that was one of the last presidents we had before we left. The lineup changes for Peace Sells didn't take place until the tour was over. And I think that happened because we just were so different from each other. You know, Carr was a lovable person and he was a fantastic drummer, but he was clearly unhappy. He was unhappy with his job at BC Rich. He was unhappy drumming for us. And I think that he was a very creative person and he wanted to have his own band, have his own studio. And that's why after we parted ways with him, he went down to Florida and developed a second approach to having a career in the metal business, which I was really happy for him. But there was also the other part about when we were ready to go on tour, we always had to go with Gar and Chris and a handful of hundreds around town to go find all of our equipment, because they would take stuff, they didn't care. They knew it wasn't theirs. They knew it was mine. They knew it was stuff that they played on, but that we got them, or stuff that they got that they figured, I'll hawk it, I'll get another one, you know, I'll do this, I'll do that. I don't know. And by the time it was time for us to get home, I couldn't say the words fast enough, "You're fired." Making So Far So Good So What actually started prior to the Peace Out's tour ending. That's primarily why the tour lasted so long, because we were out working on songs on the road, and we would sound check them, and sometimes we would play a little bit of it at the concert, just to tease people. And when the time came for us to go into the studio, and we'd been working on those songs for quite some time, I had my whole life to write my first record. I had considerable stockpile of songs to make up the second one, but by the time the third one came around, I was pretty much, you know, starting from scratch, and that set the world afire. It was the song that was actually titled Megadeth that I wrote about Alan Cranston when I first left Metallica and got in the bus. It was kind of a post-apocalyptic song about what happens after the bomb was dropped. And you got to remember, back in the 80s, we were in a Cold War back then. Young fans nowadays, they're like, Cold War? What the hell's a Cold War? The response for all the albums everyone had a certain exponential piggybacking kind of process that would happen, that it wasn't any grand scale, but it was consistent. Every record would sell at least as much as the last one, and then some, and it would keep going. We were lumped into this category of the bands that you don't want to play, but you have to. Marty came in completely different than Nick. Nick, when speaking about how these guys came into the band, they each had their own way of getting hired. Nick came in as an understudy, like every other drummer we had. Gar was our first drummer, and we knew we couldn't trust him to do his job, so I hired somebody that knew our songs, and it was Chuck Beeler. So Chuck Beeler started working with us as a drum tech. Gar blew it. Chuck got hired, and then we're working for a while, and Chuck starts to mess up. And our sound man at the time said, "Hey, I know this guy named Nick Menza. He plays guitar and he sings, and I think you'll love him." So Nick comes out, and I hire him, and Chuck blows it, and Nick becomes the drummer. So that's kind of the way things were going. Nick got hired long before he became the drummer. He was the drummer. But Nick also made it really difficult to wait for Chuck to make that final mistake where he was going to be asked to leave. It wasn't that Chuck wasn't a great guy. He was a great guy, but he was not the right drummer for Megadeth, because we were more jazz influenced and he was very punk influenced. So asking Nick to join was simple. Marty, on the other hand, was different, because we spent, 2-3 years looking for a guitar player, and I had seen Marty's CD on our manager at the time, this guy named Ron Lafitte. We had Marty's CD on Ron's desk, and it was the Dragon Kiss CD, so it had Marty with 2 different hair colors. It's brown down to here, and then my color on the bottom. And I just looked at the CD and I thought, nope, not gonna do it. We had this guy come down to rehearsal, set up his gear, tell me he wrote Wake Up Dead. I couldn't get him out of there fast enough. The next guy comes in, sets up his gear, and he goes, "Okay, show me the songs." And I went, I can't take it anymore. We were back in Ron's office, and I grabbed Marty's CD and I stuck it in. And I went, holy cow, this guy's fantastic. He wants to play with us? Yeah. let's audition him tomorrow. Okay, well, I don't know if it'll happen tomorrow. I said, make it tomorrow. So they tried. I don't know if it was tomorrow or not, but Marty shows up at rehearsal, and I've never seen him before. Nick, mind you, has been with us every day out on the road learning all the songs. Marty sets up the amplifier he brings a guitar tech named Tony DiLeonardo. Tony sets up his amp, and I said, look, Tony, put that crap over there. Use my stuff. Set up a Marshall stack, set up another Marshall stack. I said, Marty, when it's time to do the lead solo, step on that red button, because that's going to make that Marshall stack join that Marshall stack, and I'll be able to hear your leads. We're playing. The lead solo comes, and watch this. As soon as he stepped on the button, the heavens opened and the angels started singing. And I knew that I never had to settle on mediocre players anymore, that there are people like Marty out there who are exotic and fantastic. And that's why I think I've been able to, not garner, because that's the wrong word, but just be able to play with so many wonderful players over the course of my career. Rest in Peace was a nightmare to make. Mike Klink had come on and said, I'm currently booked to do the Guns N' Roses record, and if they call, I have to leave. And he left. Axl called. Now, who in their right mind would have ever bet $1 that Axl would have shown up? And he shows up. But I figured, all right, I'm gonna finish this. So I told the engineer that was working with us, we're gonna finish this. So we finished it, and he took over. He was working on the leads with me and the vocals, so I started singing and doing the solos, and we turned it in, and it was great. I didn't have any idea people were going to relate to it as much as they were, but they did. They really liked it. And I thought, okay, so what is it that's making people like this? It's the aggression, it's the tone. But that was probably the most fun I've had in the band, besides right now.
What are you reading, Dave?
Bob Halford just gave me this Harley book. Nice man. Definitely a cool guy. Don't try this at home.
But then I met Max Norman, and when we were working on the record after Rest in Peace, when we started doing Countdown to Extinction, he took a really deep interest in the records. First guy I've ever worked with as a producer that had the willingness to do homework and listen to the songs and have some notes. And they were copious notes too. It wasn't like he just said, oh, cool song, blah, blah, blah. This sounds like a rocker. Oh, this is a fun one. You know, there were songs about, at this point, cut the song, make a modulation, raise the chord, stop here, this is too slow, raise this tempo a little bit. And I thought, wow, this guy really knows his shit. And sure enough, it's our first double platinum was with Max. I remember writing most of it, and I had no idea how big that song was going to be or how hooky it was going to be. It was my first real attempt at being a singer. That entire record was my first real attempt at being a singer. Prior to that, with Rest in Peace, sure, I sang, but I wasn't doing things like, "Let rats through the street." I wouldn't do that. I'd go like, "Let rats through the street," you know, something like that. The initial riff, it was just a pretty simple riff, much like how Ritchie Blackmore had written Smoke on the Water. It was just a song. People said, write another song, so it was just a song. Dun, 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 dun. I think the difference between Countdown to Extinction and the records before it was, first and foremost, tempo. A lot of the songs had started to take on a little bit more of a heavy metal tempo, and some songs were even peeking into the abyss of rock music. And that became clearly evident. That was one of Max Norman's secrets when we did Euthanasia. He said that the tempos were going to be all in a certain neighborhood because the tempo of 120 beats per minute is the secret tempo for radio songs. I didn't know that. And I noticed that on Euthanasia, a lot of songs were in that 120 BPM area, and I didn't like it. That's why when we reissued the records, I sped the record up a little bit because it wasn't the way that I wanted it. Well, as much as I hate saying this, the Countdown to Extinction tour was canceled for health reasons, and we had been out on tour with Stone Temple Pilots, and you know, I had told those guys how great I thought they were, and I told Weiland, whatever you do, stay away from heroin, and I should have just kept my mouth shut because I think I made it look appealing by saying that. And on that tour, there was a lot of drug use going on, and I basically just relapsed really hard and wanted to go home. Didn't want to be out on the road anymore, didn't want to play. I watched Stone Temple Pilots, and that's the same time that Countdown's out, right? Countdown came out, it was #2. I was furious that Billy Ray Cyrus had the #1 record and we couldn't shake him. That really made me angry, and I felt like, you know what, I don't know that I'm ever gonna get another chance to do that. So when we went out and then all of a sudden SDP hit with Sex Type Thing, maybe? I can't remember what song it was, but they just exploded, and I was so happy for them, but I knew it was time to go home. My wife came out on the road, and she saw me, and she said, "You're going home right now." And I left. I went home. I went and got cleaned up, and those guys went on to great things, and I learned a lot about myself at that point because there was obviously there was some kind of feeling of envy, but it was for somebody I didn't even really know, so I had no idea where it was coming from. So in essence, what seemed to be really a bad thing turned out being really great because it helped me take more of an introspective look at myself. When I went out to the place out in Arizona, Wickenburg, I had already come home from the Megadeth SDP tour and was ready to get cleaned up and just, you know. I don't want this to be a big drunkalogue or drugalogue or anything like that, but I do think that the time frame that was going on back during that early part of the 90s, there was a lot of, I don't know, a lot of people were dying. So it wasn't really shocking that, you know, Nicky would OD or that, you know, Dave would OD, you know. Honestly, if you think about it, and this is something that if you're honest with yourself, you're gonna be able to say yes to this question. Anybody who has ever taken more than they're supposed to take. If you take a pain pill, if you take 2, you've overdosed. You know, you got to look at these things, and if you really want to live life on the straight and narrow, it's hard. It's really hard. So I went out to the place in Arizona, and that's where I actually died. I don't remember a thing. There wasn't any blue light, there wasn't any white light, there wasn't any kaleidoscope, there wasn't any football scores, there was nothing. I'd gone there and woke up a few days later, and I looked out the window, and I didn't know where I was. I had no idea. And imagine last thing you remember was you were on tour with Stone Temple Pilots, and then a blur kind of hits you for about a week, and then you end up looking out your window in the desert at Cactus. I thought at first I was kidnapped. It's the first thing I thought, I was kidnapped, and I was down in Mexico. And then the nurse came in, and she said, "Boy, we thought we lost you." And the guy that was the program director for the hospital there was friends of mine and my wife, and he came in and told Pam, he's dead, you need to come down there. And so she drove from the apartment that she was staying at to the hospital, and they had resuscitated me in between then. So, I mean, I wasn't ready to die. I'm not ready to go. I didn't willingly do that. You know, I did it because I was under the influence, and I think if people, a lot of times, if they can just change their mentality about a lot of the stuff that they do, they can get free from it. You know, I mean, I don't beat myself up over that. When I hear it, you know, you died, yeah, and then I got saved. Saturday night palsy is, it's a disease where it's a manifestation of a nerve being crushed. Specifically, Saturday night palsy is about having your arm or a limb have the circulation cut off somewhere. You're sitting in a chair, you're laying in a bed, you're on a bench, and somehow you've fallen asleep there and your circulation gets cut off. I had the circulation cut off on my left arm, on the inside of my bicep, on the radial ulnar. And on that bone there's like a notch in the bone where the nerve will ride in that notch, so it won't move around the arm, I guess. And also, when that nerve went across the back of the chair, my arm fell across, the back of the seat pushed up against that nerve and cut the circulation off to it. And the nerve, if you look at it under a microscope, is supposed to be approximately 4 millimeters, the nerve head, I guess it's called a dendrite or something. And once you crush that, it's much like a chewing of a drinking straw. The doctor told me when I first got hurt, "Oh, you know, you'll get 80% back." And I said, 80% of my playing? And he goes, "Oh, no, son, you'll never play again. You'll get 80% use of your arm back if you're lucky." I had moments where I entertained the thought of doing something different with my life. Did I honestly ever allow myself to think beneath my standards for myself? That I would never play guitar again? No. I was afraid. Yes, I didn't know that I would ever play again, but I didn't think I wouldn't play again. I remember a lot, and I set out to work with Chris Rakestraw and Chris Adler from Lamb of God. Kiko came in, and he basically flew here from Los Angeles, and I went to lunch with him, and we came back. I had a phone call. He picked up my acoustic guitar, and he started playing acoustic while I'm on the phone. And after a few seconds, the voice on the phone disappeared. It was so magnificent. So when we went in with Kiko, it was basically teaching him the remainders of the songs and letting him go to work on soloing. So I think when it came down to doing Dystopia, I knew I had to be very careful. I wrote all of the music, and then Chris Rakestraw and I went over to Southern Ground, Zach Brown's studio. We finished our solos and vocals there. When I found out I had cancer, I was convinced there was something wrong. We were out on tour, we were doing the Jimi Hendrix Experience thing, and I had just had a tooth fixed back here on the bottom on my left-hand side, and it was hurting really, 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 really bad. And I thought, you know what, I bet you the dentist was trying to do something, and something happened and he didn't see it, and maybe one of those little tools broke off in my gum. Maybe there's some debris, maybe an old crown splintered and a piece of glass from the ceramic went into my gum. Who knows? So I go back to the dentist and he goes, "Oh, Dave, I can't see it. I think you need to go see a oral surgeon, because the oral surgeon will be able to tell you what's going on." And so I go to see the oral surgeon, and he makes me wait. There's nobody there. End of the day, he's goofing around with the young chicks in his office. And I'm getting mad. And he comes in and he goes, "Hey, looks like you got the big C. You need to go see an ENT to make sure." And I just froze. And then I sat back a little bit and I said, "What?" It felt like I was there for a year. And then he said the same thing. "Looks like you got the big C. You should go see an ENT." So I got up, I walked out, I got in my car, closed the door, and I sat there for a little while, and I finally looked up and I had tears coming down my face. I wasn't crying, but I was visibly in some kind of state of denial. I don't know that I ever went into shock, but I was visibly surprised, and something was wrong. If you would have seen me, you would have known something was wrong. So I went to my ENT, who's a really great young doctor here, and he said, "Well, I can't really see it. We need to do a scope." And he tried to do the scope down my nose, and I started barfing, and he said, "Well, we're gonna have to knock you out and go in that way." And I said, "Look, I don't care what you gotta do. You're not putting that down my nose again. I know that much because it hurts and I can't do it. So if you have to knock me out, knock me out." So they knocked me out, did the test. 2 weeks, he came back to me and he said, "You have a tumor, and it's on the left side of your throat, and 2 of the lymph nodes on the right side have it too." We went to the doctor there, and then we went down to MD Anderson down in Texas. And he said, "Well, you're going to have to live here for 11 weeks. And I was like, "No way. I'm not going to be down here away from my family for 11 weeks when I could die from this shit." You know, so I went back home and I went to Vandenberg, and my radiologist and my chemotherapist saved my life, and I feel great. I have fatigue really bad sometimes. I mean, I can fall asleep on a dime if I'm not taking care of myself. But it's gotten a lot better. When I first was pronounced cancer-free, I was really excited, but I was really, really weak. And you know, I think when you have something like that where you watch your life flash before your eyes, the first time, like it happened during the tour in '92, you know, you kind of, I mean, for me, I thought, fuck, I'm an outlaw, you know? But when it happened the second time, I thought, you know what, I don't want to leave my wife alone. I don't want to have my kids have their dad die because of something dumb that I did. I didn't pay attention to my treatment or do all of my therapy perfectly the way that I was supposed to. And I did, and I think that a lot of people have gotten a lot of hope from it. Well, Bruce is a gentleman and a consummate professional, and I didn't think about it until after I had said something, but he basically encouraged me and said that you got to listen to what they tell you, because in the end, he did, and his voice sounded better. And I thought, that's great, because I want my voice to get better, because it had started to noticeably have issues, strength, endurance. It just, episode after episode of needing oxygen and so on. I know for me, I just did what works, you know, and was having a problem eating, so they said, eat what you like, and you know what, I like chocolate shakes, so I eat chocolate shakes every day, a lot of them, and I feel great. I'm in pretty good shape. I'm keeping my weight on. There's going to come a time where me and Miss Chocolate Shake are going to have to say goodbye to each other, but for now it's working. For me, when it comes down to playing guitar and singing, I've always looked at the guitar playing as being my first love and the most important thing that I do. The things I still love about playing guitar is that I can put the guitar on and I can make another person anticipate, make them stop what they're doing and wait and watch, see. And to know that I have that kind of gift, that I can pick up a guitar and that I can make a sound from it that is going to be soothing to people. You know, when you think about songwriting, most people don't think about, you know, what is it you're really trying to do? Or you're trying to put a bunch of notes together that people are going to find enjoyable. That's hard. You're also going to put enough notes together that people find enjoyable in a long enough successful series that it's going to be able to be considered a musical piece. And then if you really got some brass, you're going to try and put some words over it and sing it. And that is very, very hard. I always refer back to another really important scene from Purple Rain when Prince was getting chastised by the club owner, and he said, the only people that understands your music is yourself. And I thought, wow, I don't ever want to be a guy that the only person that understands my music is me. I want people to love the music. I want it to help set them free, give them a way to you know, just feel liberated. I think we all have to find our rhythm in life. We have to find our rhythm. We all have a frequency that we live at, we oscillate at. When I think about when I'm going to be standing in front of my maker and what I'm going to say, I think about, you know, regrets and any second thoughts or you know, anything any doubts or wishes, any do-overs, any mulligans, any of that stuff. And I think right now, this is the time for me to focus on all that stuff. And if something doesn't work out right, to not let that come with me into the next world, to do what's right. Have I ever thought about retiring? I have to say yes. I thought about myself retiring when I couldn't play, because I was forced to. I thought about myself retiring because someday it's going to inevitably come, whether I hang my guitar up or they lower my body down. My legacy right now has been so flattering to people that we've influenced, whether they're amateurs or even members of the Big Four. You know, got guys in all four bands that were influenced by my guitar playing, and then you have to figure how many millions of bands did the Big Four bands all influence. So, you know, my legacy is pretty much out there right now. I do hope that people will learn that I'm not a big scary monster and that they can come up and say hi and that I won't breathe flames on them. I'm hoping that there's going to be a lot of opportunities for us to meet with our fans out there and me to introduce them to the new record and the new guitars, and that I'll be able to continue making music and touring for at least another 10 years, I hope. And I think I'm going to do it. In fact, I know I'm going to do it.